They weren't given an order. There was no command. But after what they saw inside Dachau, some of them made a decision on their own. The road into Dachau concentration camp didn't feel like a place that was still being fought over. That was the first thing that didn't sit right. There were no burned-out vehicles on the approach, no fresh craters, no scattered gear left behind from a retreat. Just a narrow road, dry, quiet, and open. Too open. A line of American soldiers moved forward anyway, boots pressing into the dirt in a steady rhythm that had carried them through towns and forests for weeks. Rifles were held the way they were trained to be held, not tight, not loose, controlled, familiar. That part still made sense, but the silence didn't. One of the men near the front slowed down slightly, not enough for anyone to call it out, just enough that the man behind him had to adjust his step. He looked ahead, then slightly to the right. There was a set of train tracks running alongside the road, and on those tracks, a train. It stretched longer than it should have. Boxcars, one after another, sitting still like they had been left there in a hurry, except nothing about it felt rushed. There were no guards nearby, no visible movement, no sign that anyone had tried to secure it. Just stillness. The man in front stopped this time. Not fully, just enough. Another soldier came up beside him. "You see that?" he said quietly. The first man didn't answer. He was already stepping off the road, moving toward the tracks without being told to. A few others followed, not as a unit, just naturally. As they got closer, the smell started to change. It wasn't immediate. It built slowly, like something carried on the air that didn't belong outside. One of the soldiers covered his nose with the back of his hand, not dramatically, just instinct. "What is that?" someone muttered. No one answered. One of the boxcar doors was already open, halfway.
Not enough to see everything inside from a distance, just enough to show darkness and something uneven along the floor. The first soldier reached up and grabbed the edge of the door. His hand stayed there for a second longer than it needed to. Then he pulled himself up. His boots scraped against the wood as he leaned in. From the ground, the others couldn't see his face clearly, just his back, and the way it suddenly stopped moving. Completely. A second passed, then another. "Hey!" the man below called out. "What is it?" No answer. The soldier inside didn't shift, didn't step back, didn't say anything. Another man moved forward, grabbed the edge, and pulled himself up beside him. He looked in, and his body reacted before his mind did. He froze. Then slowly, he pulled himself back down, boots hitting the ground harder than they should have. He didn't look at anyone right away, just shook his head once. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough. The others didn't ask again. They already knew something wasn't right. More men moved past the train after that, but no one moved the same way they had before. The rhythm was gone. The spacing between them changed. Some walked faster like they wanted to get away from it. Others slowed down like they were trying to understand it without looking back. No one gave an order to move on. They just did. The gates came into view not long after. Simple, not heavily defended. No visible resistance waiting behind them. That didn't make sense either. A soldier stepped through first, scanning left, then right. Inside, there were people. Not soldiers. Figures moving slowly across the open space. Some barefoot, some barely able to stand straight. Their movements weren't coordinated. They didn't rush. They didn't hide. They just moved. Or didn't. One man sat against a wall, staring forward like he was looking at something far beyond the camp itself. Another stood in place, swaying slightly, as if his body wasn't fully keeping up with him.
No one spoke. No one ran toward the soldiers. That was the second thing that felt wrong. One of the Americans lowered his rifle slightly without realizing it. Another took a step forward, then stopped. Not because of danger, because he didn't know what he was looking at. Behind him, someone said quietly, "This isn't... What is this?" No one answered. There were no instructions coming in. No officer stepping forward to explain what they were seeing. No voice resetting the situation. Just the same silence, now heavier. Because now it wasn't just something they sensed. It was something they were standing inside. And from that moment on, what happened next wasn't going to come from training. It wasn't going to come from orders. It was going to come from whatever this place had just done to them.
Inside Dachau concentration camp, nothing moved the way it should have. The soldiers didn't enter as a unit anymore. The formation had broken without anyone saying it had. Men who had spent months moving in sync now walked at different speeds, drifting apart in small gaps that kept getting wider the deeper they went. One of them stepped off the path and moved toward a row of low wooden barracks. The door was already open. It hung slightly to one side, like it had been pushed too many times without being fixed. He paused at the entrance, not long, just enough to look inside without stepping in. It was dark at first. Then shapes started to form, layers, movement, but not the kind that made sense. People were inside, sitting, lying down. Some turned their heads slowly toward the light. Others didn't move at all. The soldier didn't go in, not because he didn't want to, because something in him understood. That stepping inside meant seeing it fully. And once he did, there wouldn't be a way to step back out of it the same. He took a step back instead, then another. He didn't say anything. A second man walked past him and went in anyway. He had to duck slightly to get through the door. As he disappeared inside, the man outside kept his eyes on the ground, like he didn't trust himself to look again. Somewhere behind them, a voice called out, "Medic!" It wasn't loud, but it carried. A few soldiers turned. Others didn't. They were already focused on different things now, different parts of the same place, each one trying to understand it in their own way. Near the center of the compound, a group of prisoners stood together loosely, not forming a line, not organized, just gathered, watching. One of the Americans approached them slowly. He reached into his pack and pulled something out, a small ration. He held it forward, his hand slightly extended. The closest man looked at it, then at him, then back at it again. He didn't take it, not right away.
His fingers twitched slightly like he wanted to, but something deeper held him back, something learned, something that didn't trust the moment yet. The soldier moved his hand a little closer. "It's okay," he said quietly. The words sounded wrong in the air, not because they weren't true, because they didn't fit here. The man finally reached out and took the food, slowly, carefully, like it might disappear if he moved too fast. He still didn't eat it. Behind them, movement shifted again. A group of SS guards had been gathered near a wall, disarmed, watched, some standing, some sitting, their uniforms still intact, their posture uncertain. They weren't resisting.
That should have made things simple. It didn't. One American soldier walked past them, then stopped. He turned back slowly. His eyes moved from one guard to the next, not identifying, not checking, just looking. And now the two things existed in the same space, the prisoners and the men who had been in charge of them. No one said anything, because once you saw both, it became harder to follow what you were supposed to do next. An officer stepped in from the side. "Keep moving," he said. "We'll deal with them." The words were clear, controlled, exactly what should have been said. But they didn't land the same way anymore. The soldier didn't respond. He didn't even look at the officer. His eyes were still on the guards. A second voice came in, sharper this time. "That's an order." The soldier shifted his weight slightly, but didn't move away. Around them the air felt heavier now, not because of noise, because of what wasn't being said. More soldiers slowed as they passed. Some glanced at the guards, others looked away quickly, like they didn't want to connect the two things fully. One of the guards spoke suddenly. "I was not SS," he said quickly, his voice uneven. "I was assigned—" No one answered him. The words just hung there, unfinished. From somewhere deeper inside the camp, another voice echoed.
Not shouting, just calling out something no one could quite make out. The soldier near the guards took a step forward, not toward his unit, toward them. No one stopped him immediately, not because they approved, because by now, something had already shifted. And the more the soldiers saw, the easier it became to act on something else. It didn't happen all at once. There was no clear moment where everything changed. It built quietly, in separate places, between different men, until it reached a point where it couldn't hold anymore. Near the edge of the yard, the group of SS guards had been moved into a tighter space, not formally arranged, just contained, watched from a short distance by a handful of American soldiers who had stopped moving forward with the rest. One of those soldiers stood with his rifle lowered, but not relaxed. His hands weren't steady anymore, not shaking, just tight, like he was holding on to something that kept trying to move. He had been inside one of the barracks earlier, long enough. He hadn't said a word since. One of the guards shifted slightly and looked at him. "I am not SS," the man said again, this time more directly. His hands lifted a little higher, palms forward. "I was forced." The soldier didn't answer. Behind him, an officer approached, boots hitting the ground in short, controlled steps. "Move along," the officer said. "They'll be processed with the rest." The soldier didn't turn, didn't nod, didn't step away. A second soldier moved up beside him, younger, eyes fixed on the same group. "Did you see it?" he asked quietly. No response, just a slight shift in the first man's stance. A third soldier stopped a few steps behind them, then a fourth. The guards noticed. Some looked straight ahead, others glanced at each other. One of them took a half step forward before catching himself and stopping again. "Please," another one said, voice lower now. "We surrender. We follow orders." Orders. The officer heard it too. He stepped closer, positioning himself between the two groups. "That's enough," he said, louder this time. "We're not doing this here. Stand down." For a second, it felt like the moment might reset, like the structure might come back. One of the soldiers lowered his rifle slightly. Another shifted his weight back. But the first man didn't move. His eyes were still locked on the guard who had spoken. Something passed between them. Not words, not exactly, just recognition. Then the guard said one more thing. I did nothing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't defensive. It was flat. And that was when the soldier raised his weapon. The officer saw it immediately. "Don't," he started. The shot cut him off. Then another shot, from somewhere just behind the first. And then another. The guards reacted, some dropping instantly, others stumbling back, hands still raised like it mattered. One turned, trying to move, but didn't make it more than a step. The officer stepped forward, shouting now, "Cease fire! That's an order! Cease fire!" Some rifles lowered. Some didn't. One soldier fired again, slower this time, almost like he was finishing something. Another man grabbed his arm, pulling it down. "That's enough," he said under his breath. But the sound had already spread. Across the yard, other soldiers turned. Some moved toward the noise. Others froze where they were, trying to understand what was happening without stepping closer. Different men reacting in different ways at the same time. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it began to slow. Fewer shots, longer gaps between them, voices taking over again. "Stand down! Lower your weapons! Back away!" This time, more men listened. Rifles came down. Steps moved backward. Breathing, heavier now, replaced the noise. The guards who were still standing didn't move. They just stood there, or dropped slowly to the ground. And then it was quiet again. But not the same kind of quiet, because something had been crossed by the moment itself. And once it happened, there was no way to pull it back. For a few seconds after the last shot, no one moved. Not because they were told to stop, because no one knew what to do next. The sound had ended, but it didn't feel over. It just dropped out of the air, leaving something behind that was heavier than the noise itself. A soldier near the center of the yard kept his rifle raised longer than he needed to, not aiming, not searching, just holding it there, like his body hadn't caught up yet. Then, slowly, he lowered it. He didn't sling it back, didn't relax his grip, just let it hang in his hands. A few feet away, another man took a step backward, then another, until his boot hit something behind him. He stopped and looked down. One of the guards. He stared for a moment too long, then looked away quickly like he hadn't meant to. No one spoke right away, even the officers. They were there, moving, looking, but not stepping in the way they had before, not immediately resetting things, because they had seen it too. One officer finally crossed the space between the groups, his pace steady but slower than it had been earlier. He stopped where the soldiers had been standing. He didn't raise his voice. "Who fired?" he asked. The question stayed in the air. No one answered. Not because they didn't hear him, because answering it didn't feel simple anymore. He waited a few seconds longer than he should have. "Who gave the order?" A soldier standing off to the side shifted his weight slightly. His eyes stayed forward, but his jaw tightened. "There wasn't one," he said. Quiet, flat. The officer looked at him, really looked this time, like he was trying to decide if pushing further would change anything. It wouldn't. He knew that. So he didn't ask again. Around them, the camp continued to move, but differently now. Medics passed through with stretchers, stepping carefully between bodies, choosing where to look and where not to. One of them knelt beside a prisoner near the wall, speaking softly,
repeating the same words more than once, until the man in front of him reacted. Another soldier walked toward the barracks, then stopped halfway. He didn't go in again.
He just stood there, staring at the doorway, like something inside it was still waiting. Near the group of guards, the one still standing didn't try to move anymore. Their hands stayed where they were, their shoulders lowered slightly, not in surrender, in something else, something quieter. The officer turned away from them and looked across the yard, at his men, at the prisoners, at the space between them. For a moment it felt like he might say something, reassert control, rebuild the structure, put the day back into something that could be followed. He didn't, because there wasn't anything clean enough to say. Later there would be reports, typed, structured, clean. They would try to place the moment into something that made sense, time, location, sequence. Words like incident would be used, words that kept things contained. Statements would be taken, questions repeated. Who was there? Who saw what? Who acted first? But even then, something would stay out of reach. Because the moment itself hadn't come from confusion about orders. It had come from clarity, from seeing something too clearly, all at once, and not knowing where to put it. Back in the yard, one of the soldiers finally sat down, not carefully, just dropped onto a low step near the barracks. His hands rested on his knees, fingers still slightly tense, like they hadn't fully let go of what they had been doing. He looked ahead, not at anything specific, just ahead. Another man walked past him, slower than before. He glanced down briefly, then kept going, like stopping might pull him into something he didn't want to face yet. No one talked about what had just happened. Not there, not like that. Because saying it out loud would have meant deciding what it was, and no one seemed ready to do that. The camp was secured.
That part would be written down. That part would be clear. But what happened inside it didn't stay in any clear line. Not between orders and actions, not between right and wrong. Just somewhere in between, where no one had planned to be, and where some of them would stay, long after they left.